Hello there and welcome to my arty corner here on YouTube. My name's Angela Porter, and around the internet I'm also, my sort of like username often is Artword. Although on Facebook, my main Facebook thing is Angela Porter Artword. I've put the two together. So you can find me there if you want to show me any of your drawings that you've done that have been inspired by what I do in my videos. I'd love to see. I'd also like to thank you before I go any further today for all your subscriptions. They mean an awful lot and I appreciate each and every one of you, so thank you. Thank you for all the lovely comments that have been left. I will get round to answering them or replying to them after I've done the video and it's uploading and whatnot. And also thank you for thumbs up, likes, and especially if you share videos with others around that you know will enjoy them or find them useful, or give a shout out to me. So if you show your artwork on social media, please tag me so I can see as well, because that's really helpful in its own little way. So no further ado, I hope you're all doing well. Hope that you're fine and well. I'm a bit late getting up today. I didn't sleep very well last night and I'm behind, but I'll catch up. Because one thing about sleeping late means that I end up going to bed later. It's a horrible circle and cycle until eventually I just exhaust myself and sleep myself into a normal kind of sleep, I guess. But here we are. It's not a problem. Oh, mucky glasses I can't see through, so let's just sort that out before I go any further, I think. So this is where I left yesterday, is with this sort of sampler page that we're working on. I'm working on in a series of videos, because I think it's sort of like things pop up and you just think, oh, I forgot I did that. This thing popped up in my Pinterest, a piece of my artwork, and it was a sampler very much, well, sort of like this, but with Romanesque patterns in and also textural patterns and so on. And it was on tan paper with black and white ink. Would you believe it? And what am I doing now? Using coloured paper and so on. It's amazing how I forget things I loved doing in the past and keep coming back to them. And how I've also used them in other ways. So there's no idea is ever unique. So I did this lovely pattern at the bottom, whose name I've already forgotten. And I added this ear of wheat or corn here, or grass, or flower buds of some kind or another. And I rambled on in the description about how I missed an opportunity to actually have it going under the connections between the windows. But that's something to think about later on. Now I do have to get to work, as in inking in colouring templates fairly soon. So my task today is going to be quite short. I may do one or two sections. I'm going to leave these for a little while, but I just wanted to show you, I think I showed you this one yesterday, is one I started working on. Got a bit to go with it, but I want to show you this motif. Now I know this is by Zen Linea, as she's known around YouTube, but I can't remember its name, but I will look it up and pop it in the description. Talking of Gothic Romanesque architecture and Gothic architecture, this reminds me very much of designs you'd find in Gothic architecture. This one is too, up here. This is one of my favourite kinds of motifs. I like certain elements of Gothic architecture. I don't like it when it gets too fussy and fancy as a whole, but individually there's beauty in it. The other one I've been doing is this, which is an interesting sheet of paper, because it's one of my distress ink coloured ones, but I've collaged some old book paper down on it and white gessoed on the top, so I have that kind of pattern coming through. And I've been looking at Rebecca Blair's artwork, who I've mentioned previously, and so I've been taking inspiration from what she does and working out how she does things, because as long as you give credit to an artist, you're not exactly copying, it's gaining inspiration. And it's just looking at these things and thinking, okay, so how can I make use of this? Or is this of any benefit to me? And of course, it reminds me of things I did long before I saw Rebecca Blair's work. It reminds me of the way I add patterns to textile work and to the way I used to draw in journals and so on, and the inspiration I got from looking at cellular textures, microscopic textures and geological and so on, and taking abstracts out of things. So it's inspiration from her in terms of inspiring me to perhaps take a little trip back in time, but bring it to where I am now. Because that was when I was doing those things, when I was starting my journey into art and exploring things. That's about 20 years ago. So in 20 years, I've done a lot of art and a lot of ways of doing things. This I particularly like here is where it really is the edge of torn paper. And so I put a pattern on the torn paper and just a background texture underneath. But then I've got this pattern here, which reminds me of torn paper as well. So I may do some of these, or perhaps an idea with this. This is the only odd section up here because I had a plan to pop. I was going to pop this on here and use that as a kind of peeping out around the edges and sides. That's why I created this background paper, but it turned into this. So it's fine. So with no further ado, let me get on. Okay, this lovely pattern by Zen Linea, Anica, who I really love the way she does her work. She uses quite intense shading, thickness of line and bright white highlights, and really makes her work look three-dimensional. And that she's akin to, but not exactly the same as, Eniokan. They're both CZTs. And they really do like playing with highlight and shadow, perhaps in a different way to how I do things. So to draw this lovely motif from her, I'm going to start by deciding that I want to leave enough of a gap here, if I show you, for this corner here, because I want this little curly bit in, perhaps. You could start close to the corner, but this is basically a circle. So I've put a sort of like a corner in a little bit. So I've put a square there, and I'm going to mark dots in the corners because this is where I'm going to aim my sort of like leafy shapes at, and they are going to be made out of, well, that looks almost like a question mark rather than an S, but this kind of shape. So I've got a W, haven't I, going over the stretched out W going over there. So I want to bring this in and down, and this in and down, and then I'm going to complete the last leaf there. Now, I'm often, wrong pen. Didn't want to use that one. I've got an 03 that I often will draw things in pencil and then will adapt or alter things as I go. First thing I want to do is to get rid of that line in pencil because I really don't want to draw the whole circle in. But what I do want to get is a feeling that I've got a circular shape coming down. It's not symmetrical, and there's no problem with that. And I am just going to stretch these out perhaps a little bit more so they reach closer to the corner, and they may end up a little altered in shape, and that's fine because I'm all for not necessarily following slavishly my pencil lines. They are just a guide. And then that's lovely on its own. You can do things with that. But I particularly like this when we add sculpted shapes inside. So I'm essentially adding a teardrop shape inside each of these sections that I can then create some dimensionality. So let's start with the outside. And I'm first going to pop in my frame for this section of my sampler, and my lines are a bit wobbly, deliberately so in places, and other places that's how they've just worked out. And I'm going to thicken the lines to the left and the bottom of the outside shape. So I'm looking at the outside, adding weight to the outside of this line. And so I'm only going to do it to the lines that are on the left part of each shape and the bottom of it, like so. And I may have to go back and thicken some a bit more to give them a fairly equal looking. The other thing I'm going to do is I'm just going to add some ink in these indented corners and just round them just that little bit, it helps to accentuate the shape. I haven't done a good job of this one this morning, but perhaps it looks a lot better once I'll erase the pencil lines. Now for these inside shapes, I want to pay attention, again going inside the lines towards the centre of these shapes, but I'm going to thicken the lines that are to the top and to the right of this particular shape. So that's the top and that's the right, like so. Here's the top and going down is the right. This one we've got top and right there, and top and right here. And if I have to adjust the thickness so they all tie in, that's fine. The one thing I want to do before I erase lines, because I'm going to let this ink dry for a moment before I erase any lines, is this little curly piece. And it is, it's a fescue in Zen Tangle, nomenclature. That's the proper word I was looking for, nomenclature. The names of things. It was a big thing when I did organic chemistry, or chemistry in general, but organic chemistry in particular. So there's rules to naming compounds of carbon, organic compounds, and it's called nomenclature. And every time you learnt a new type of either organic chemical or a new way that they were structured, you had to learn new rules sometimes about nomenclature and add to it. And once you got the hang of it, it was really easy. And some of the names could become very long, which is why a lot of organic chemicals have common names, and even some of those are quite long and complex. So that I really do like. Okay, I'm going to let the ink dry on that, as I say, before I try to erase it. So let me go to this one here. And I am just going to ink this in. So I've got a nice long thin one here. And I'm going to do one of these, I think. So I don't know what I'm going to do exactly, but I'm going to split this section. I'm going to use my pencil and I'm just going to draw some kind of line down the middle. Now it can be as smooth or as jagged as you like. You just don't think about it. You just let your pencil create a shape and we work with that. Now I've got one there, but do you know what? I think I could do with a second one on this side perhaps. And then I am doubling my pencil line up here, so I get a gap between these sections, that fine gap. Now of course I can always come back with a white pen. And this section looks a bit big, so how about we add a thin one here. Now I'm not trying to follow the contours, I'm not trying to do anything that is just taking some of the pencil off before I start, so we don't get that confused with the pen lines. I've forgotten what I've said. Oh yeah, so you don't have to sort of like do, what do they call them? Auras, so where you're following the line and making it echo itself over and over. Here it is just random shapes. And I think for the very first bit here, I'm just going to draw like so. And I'll decide, I will pop the other line in. This is where I'm going to take a little bit more time to follow that, because I do want these lines to aura each other. And then here, I'm just going to fill this in with the lines. And perhaps every now and again, I'll put a thicker line in for interest. But I'm not counting lines, I'm just doing that thick line where I think I would like one. I want it to feel that it's a bit random, a bit deliberate. Well, or a bit deliberate at least, because these lines very much are. Mine are fairly perpendicular or straight, but if they wobble a bit, that's fine. I wish my lines would wobble a little bit as I draw them at times. But years of being a fussy so-and-so and at times a hyper-perfectionist, which is so hard on you. I still have that element of perfectionist in me. But a hyper-perfectionist, whatever you do is never good enough as far as you're concerned. And you compare yourself to everybody else and think you're useless. And this does creep out to me on days when I'm not very well, or when when some emotional weather hits me, which it does. Weird thing is I can feel quite low and fed up and not happy in myself, and yet still feel contented. Apparently it's a very Western idea that we can only hold one emotion at a time. Whereas in Eastern traditions, it's quite possible to hold more than one emotion at a time. Now, part of me is thinking, wouldn't it be cool to carry this on over here? And I'm thinking, not this morning, is to skip a section and have this peeking through here. So I'm not going to do that. But I am going to draw this section in. And I'm actually going to do this with all the sections. I was thinking about just leaving, actually with this one, I think I might pop just one line in here, but use the other pencil line then as a guide to where my pattern's going to finish, so that I don't need these lines in always. Okay, so in this one, I think I'll do something a bit different. Well, I know I'm going to do something a bit different. I'm going to pop in a zigzag. So I've got a series of triangles, top and bottom. And then we can do something with these triangles. So these triangles, I'm actually going to... Now, which side do I want to do that? It doesn't matter, but I think I'll do them this side, where I'm just going to split them in half. And as my triangles have kind of followed the waviness, I'm going to have to do my best to work out which way that central line's going to go. And then I am going to use lines again, but I'm going to fill just one side of this in with little lines. Now for this, for drawing the zigzags, no, for putting the middle line in and then adding these little lines, I'm using an 01 pen. So I think the changing line weight really does add interest, though this doesn't look like there's much of an interest. I was drawing with this pen on gesso, and although the gesso is fairly smooth, the one I've been using, the Art Basics one, Finnabair Arts from, is it Prima? It might be Prima Marketing, I could be wrong. still can catch on the gesso and, you know, rough it up a little bit. So there I've got it almost like, it's looking quite three-dimensional, as if I've got light hitting the top edge. And in these sections here, I'm going to add colour, but I want to do that with alcohol markers. Okay, I'm going to do the other side here, because what I'm going to do here, I'm trying to get my hand out of the way so you can see what I'm doing. See the tip of my pen. And I'm going to draw lines up to that lower pencil line. So I'm not drawing them up to the pen line. And then when I raise the pencil line, the edges of these lines will create, or your eye will think, oh yeah, they're following a line. It's almost like there's an imaginary line there. And I quite like this. And I think there are places where I'm going to let the lines get really close together, like here. And then I may, as this space gets wider again, or taller perhaps I should say, well, I'll start to begin to widen the gap between the lines and perhaps start to add gaps between them as well. Think op art, where you play with the amount of space or the size of things to change shape and the illusion of distance. So that's fun. Look at that, I didn't do that intentionally, but we've got quite a spot of shine there. But you can see how these lines create that edge, and if I've missed it, you can just go back and adjust it. So I quite like that, that's quite fun. Okay, and then this section here, there's a number of things I could do. There are a number of things I can do. But let me have a look. And I think what I'd like to do is I'm going to put some diva dance rock and roll in here. And I'm going to go heavy on the contrast or the black. Some nice big chunky I always call them blobs, which doesn't sound very elegant or very pleasant, does it? But you know what I mean. It's these little, sort of like, they're not quite semicircular. They're part of a, you know, they're part of a semicircle. It's the Zen Tangle people, I think they refer to them as ladybugs. In the UK, we don't have ladybugs, we have ladybirds, which are exactly the same thing, but we call them ladybirds because, well, we're British. What can I say? So that's quite nice. I quite like this because I like that, the idea that we've got like a window looking through to some roses almost here. I like to finish the outside of my Diva Dance rock and rolls, these kinds of roses, with a double line. So, and I often will start my centre with a little, almost like teardrop shape as well. And because I want quite a lot of contrast here with the black and the space in between, I started them off quite soon to get that darkness right into the centre. I think Diva Dance is one of my, I say this again and again, but it's really true. It really is one of my favourite of the Zen Tangle patterns. I love the contrast that you get with it, but I also love the options you have to do things with that. So I've got to the point here where I have lost one side of my diva dance, and I'm just going around this side here. So I'll just do a couple more repeats on this side just to get that, and then a couple of lines where there's nothing on, and then we'll go to the next one. Start to add these here. I nearly always do little rounded bumps on here, but you could use other shapes. I think I've explored it in the past, and I've put things like hearts or little triangles, rounded triangles, or whatever other shapes you can put there. You're not limited to just this particular kind of shape, I suppose. That's what I want to say. And the only way to find out if something's going to work is to try it. That's all I can say. Quite like hearts in these. So perhaps I'll do that on my next one. Here, perhaps, in my last one. Perhaps I'll put a lump there, because I'd like to get past this narrow section. Shall I, shan't I? I don't know. I'm beginning to think now. Shall I? Shall I keep them all the same? I think I'll keep them all the same in this one. As in using these little lumps and bumps. Like so. We've got one that's just tucking itself away behind the edge here. These are so tiny. I haven't drawn this tiny for a long time. I tend to work much bigger than this. But there's some pleasure in creating work that is very fine and detailed as well. Not sure my eyes are enjoying it. But the arty part of me is. So I'm just going to add some there, and perhaps a bit there. So that's quite nice. I've got that change in intensity, haven't I, of black. So there's a fair amount of black here, not so much here. It varies a little here, the density of ink, but here we've got a higher density of ink, so it actually makes it stand out more. But it also pushes it backwards, which is quite fun. Okay, so eraser. Let's erase this so I can do something here with this one quickly. All right, I have got here this blue pen, which is what I used up here to add colour. So I'm going to do that inside where I'm going to pop some texture lines. I love it when I look at architecture, well this sculpture, and sometimes you can see the marks of the mason's tools. Sometimes. The older the architecture is, the more likely you are to see evidence of it in places. But it's really fascinating that you can see what they've done, so that's quite fun. And I'm also thinking that perhaps, to tie this in, I'm going to add the blue there with alcohol markers. So I'll be back in a moment. I'm just going to go and find them. Okie doke, so I'm back again, and I've just gone and got the same colour of bluey greys, or greyish blues, or dull blues. I don't know how to describe these. They're my Arteza pens, and they are from the architectural set of the Everblend markers. So if you happen to have them, I've got a glacier blue, a powder blue, an ocean blue and a stone blue. And so the glacier blue is the lightest of the blues. And I'll want to use that because, I think I want to use that one. No, I won't. I'm going to use here the middle tone, or my second lightest tone. Oh, I've just gone and put it in the wrong space there. Oh well, ho-hum. just to fill in these triangles. I'm not going right up to the line because I know that this paper alcohol markers bleed on. So if I don't go right up to the line, hopefully it'll bleed up to my black pen line. So that will pop these into, just send this section that little bit backwards and help the others to stand out. And to help with that, I am going to use the next darkest colour I've got here. Hopefully just to pop a little shadow underneath each of these. And I'm also going to pop a shadow I want one on this side, don't I? See all that effort of colouring in with that medium colour, and it's disappearing rapidly with the quantity of this. But that's okay, because this bleeds so much. Note to self is always, Angela, use marker paper when you want to use markers. It's not like I haven't got any. But as I say, it is what it is, and it's sketchbook really. And little bits and bobs I can correct with a colourless marker. But that already has sent that backwards, and even the Diva Dance appears to be sat above. So I'm going to go back with the medium one, because I do want to give some shadow to this box as well. So I am going to pop some shadow right on the edge of each side, just with the medium marker, just like so. And then I'll come back with the lighter marker just to help to blend that edge out a little bit. Particularly where we've got the lines, this area becoming bigger, like so. And then I'm going to use that middle colour again, just to add some shadow underneath here on this side of Diva Dance. So it helps to push this edge of the paper upwards. And I'll also put some here. And I missed a little bit with this, or it bled out a little bit. But again, once this is dry, I'll find my colourless marker and use it to erase that. So that has lifted that and given that some dimension. The other thing I wanted to do was to add some colour to these, which I'll do quickly while I'm here, is I wanted to add some darker colour to these lower ones, just to help to send them backwards. I'm not doing sophisticated shadowing here though. Once I get to the end I may come back with a slightly darker marker and add just a hint around the bottom edge of these. But I just think it makes such a nice difference to them. I still haven't decided what I'm going to do about that little triangle, oh, diamond shape. I say triangular and I mean diamond. Just to see what happens. Oh, sorry. I haven't decided what I'm going to do with it, if I'm going to add gold. Although I am tempted to actually use the darkest blue colour here. And perhaps put a shiny highlight on it. So that helps there with that. I have got the slightly darker colour, which I'm just going to add along the edge here, I think, just to darken the edge down. Which again, it will just help to bring some dimension in, especially if I can manage to keep this in. I do wish you could get fine liner alcohol markers, because they would be a godsend for this. Yeah, I know there's brush markers and you can get fine lines with them. Yeah, you can, but not when you're relatively heavy-handed like I am. the leaves here actually benefit from that darker edge because the background, the Distress ink background was quite dark there. So that's quite nice. And I think I am going to just fill this bit in with the darkest blue, which actually doesn't seem to flow out of the pen. Or perhaps it's just the way I'm holding the nib. Actually, it's improving now, so it's probably the fact that I left them instead of flat. I had them vertically in a bag, which is not a good idea because I think the both ends of the pen share the same ink reservoir. So if you store them vertically, the ink will gravitate towards the other end. Now it's quite dark, but I think that will lift up. Okie doke, so I do want to add some shadow to this one. And I think I'm going to just use my lightest pen, and it's to the bottom and the left of all of these shapes. And it's sort of like, almost like the thickness of the nib that I can get here. There we go, that'll be nice. And then inside, I'm going to use the slightly darker colour to begin with, because I can pop a little darker shadow here, just inside where I've popped the darker shadow anyway. And I can come back with that lighter. Actually, that was the third darkest. So I'll come back with the second darkest just to blend it out. And then I'll use the lightest right in the bottom edge of these, if I've got space. Because on this little one, we haven't got that much space there. That pen I used doesn't move with the alcohol markers at all. And the other thing I wanted to do was just to add that hint of a darker shadow close up to each line, just to intensify it that little bit more, like so, a little bit there. And I also want to give a shadow to this box, I think, because the background is looking very dull and uninteresting. And I think that is where, you see, I'm thinking of using the darkest colour, but that would be silly. But I think I might use the third darkest to colour this in. Excuse me. Do you think I will? I'm not going to try and keep any highlights here. Let's just colour this in. I've just realised I haven't put any protective paper underneath this. Oh well. It's not the end of the world. The alcohol marker, if it does get on my cutting mat, can be easily cleaned off. That's a bit darker than I'd like, perhaps, but I know they dry lighter. So I'm using the darkest colour here to add those shadows back in, so that as this dries, we will get that shadow going on as well. And I have missed in places, but I haven't got my, oh, I have got my colours marker to hand, my colours blender. Okay, where was the one I wanted to do? There was one here, wasn't there? There was. If you wait until they're dry, they don't tend to blend one into another so easily. Okay, and for this one, that one is way too dark. If I use the blender, it should help it to spread out in the paper and become less of a problem. The other thing I might do is add some texture with this to to the background as well. Little dots. It will create like little water spots. And by doing that, I'm adding texture. I could have done lines actually thinking about it. But this is quite fun. It'll be subtle, but it'll be there. So there we are. 2 sections done today. Excuse me. So we've done this one, which is lovely. I will let the alcohol, actually it came through, but it hasn't marked underneath, so that's fine. I'll let this dry and then I'll have a look at it. I'm likely to add little white dots or pale blue dots to the background, but I'll decide about that. This one does need something to lift the colours, I think, possibly, but I quite like the way I've managed to get that feeling of layer. Actually, there is one other place I wanted to add some shadow to, and that is underneath this line here. So this is the medium colour. Like so. And that will just add that shadow that lifts this up that little bit as well. And I may use, I have here a white gel pen. I have a piece of scrap paper I can clean it off on, because that's always a good plan. Oh gosh, as I scribble on there and throw it everywhere. Excuse me. And I think I may try, I could do with a finer one of these. Because this is the 08, there is no 5, I think, of these, and it's somewhere in my pencil sets or pen sets or pencil cases storage, but I'm not quite sure where. But I can still get a fairly fine line, and if I lose too much of the black lines, then I can come back and add it in with a pen once the gel pen has dried. Don't add black ink over, use a fine pen like a micron when the gel pen is wet. It will stick to your nib. And when it sticks to the nib, it can clog it up and cause all kinds of problems. So I've got some white there, and perhaps I'll just run the white along the edge here, just to give that bright colour, bright whiteness here. It also gets rid of any overspills and keeps that all very nice. And if I do overrun the edge of the black lines on this one, I won't be too worried. And I think with the Diva Dance, I'm going to put a couple of little white dots in some of these little spaces, just to add some interest in there. It's one of the things I like to do with Diva Dance. I don't know why I like to put the white dots in these, but I do. The other white dots I want to add, I forgot to do, are here on these. It's just that brightness of white, and it really does stand out, because my background's not pure white. It's a mixture of blues, and we've got this yellowy browny tone as well, that it's nice to add the white just to pick things up. And the other thing I'm going to do, and I'll do this quickly here, I'm just going to add a few little dots of white along the most plumpous parts of these leaves, right close to the edge, but not on the edge. So it's almost like they're catching light. And it's subtle, but it should increase that feeling of volume, of highlight and shadow. And particularly up here where the background is fairly dark, these will show up even more. But they're just tiny little white dots. And the last thing is this one. And again, I think I'm going to put white dots around the tops of these, where they'd catch the light the most. So it's underneath the top and right edge, and then the bottom and left as well. So the bottom and left, the top and right, there sort of. Just to give that, and I'm going to give a little white dot there. And I may just pop some little white dots here. I'll tell you what I did, and I forgot I did in this one. What I did in this one is I put these circles nestled in there. So instead I'm popping these series of white dots as an alternative. And that's it done now. I'll turn it sideways because I've got my camera a bit close otherwise, and you can see what I've done here. And I think it doesn't look too shabby at all, does it, today? So I hope that you've enjoyed that. It's quite short, I say relatively short, it most probably isn't actually. That you've enjoyed this, that you'll give this a go. I hope you're creating your own little samplers as well, because that's why I'm doing it, is to encourage you. And if you don't want to do the patterns I'm doing, choose your own. Do it your own way. And if this is too much in a small space for you, just split it in half. If these boxes are too small for you, don't do so many. It's your work. You adjust it as you need to. But I would suggest trying to stick to a monochrome colour scheme. Monochrome, short for monochrome colour scheme. A mono scheme, monochrome. No hope for me. As it ties things together, that little bit. I've just realised that bluey green there is actually that dark colour there, not the colour of the medium pen, but I'm fine with that. It's nice to have a bit of difference as well. So, until I see you again, hopefully tomorrow, maybe not, depends how much work I'm doing. I've got to get a lot done because I'm having a day out. I'm visiting a friend on Friday, so there won't be a video Friday. But there will likely be one Thursday because I'm having a break from doing colouring templates until the early part of next month to give me time to get the colouring templates done. So, look after yourselves, take care, and find time to be creative. Ta-ra for now. Bye.